my name is Justin and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first video for this channel and thank you so much for joining. It's my intent to start a channel to really discuss some of the things that I'm seeing in the workspace, specifically in the logging and analytics workspace and observability. Now, there are many different reasons why you might be interested in setting up a virtual machine. For me, this is going to be really the test playground for all of you who are interested in working with the software, some of the things that I'll be testing along the way. So without any further ado, we're going to dive in and start setting up our virtual machines. Now, to get started, we're going to need to download something to actually run these virtual machines. And for me, one of the most widely used systems out there, you'll see there are other things. There's Parallels and the Macintosh world, boxes and Linux, and some others. But VirtualBox is pretty much widely accepted as one of those sort of like universal virtual machine platforms. Now, depending on which system you're using, you'll need to download for your OS. Today, we're running this on a Windows host. Now, the host is literally the machine that you have that you are using right now. That is going to be the operating system that you need to download the software for. So for us, we're going to download for Windows. Now, I've already downloaded this, right? So there's really no reason for me to download it again. In fact, I actually have it up and running. So we'll open up VirtualBox here. And this is very similar to how yours should look, with some exception. You might have something like, a different color or something like that, but this is essentially what the UI looks like for any version of VirtualBox. Now, we want to create a virtual machine. Now, before we do that, we actually need to download something called an ISO. An ISO is an image file that represents an installation media that would typically be like a disk. You might see it traditionally put onto, something like this, like a USB key. In fact, this actually has a copy of Fedora Linux workstation on it because I was using that on a personal machine of mine. In your case, we're downloading just the file to have on our system. Now, there are all types of ISOs out there. There are all different types of Linux operating systems. Just for me and my comfort level, I'm a lot more comfortable with Ubuntu. So Ubuntu being the Linux distribution of my choice, we can go to their website. In fact, if you just go to the regular Ubuntu website, you go to download, and then for us, we're going to download Ubuntu Desktop. Now, in later sessions, we're going to download Ubuntu Server. And that's because a lot of the applications that you'll be using in testing really out in the real world will be running on a Linux server of sorts. And there's really no reason to have the desktop environment. Now, for your comfort level, because this might be the first time that you've ever interacted with a virtual machine, we're going to start with a regular desktop environment. So at any rate, this is downloading now. I'm going to cancel it because I've already got this downloaded in my downloads directory. So we'll move over to VirtualBox now. And again, just to show you this, in my downloads, you'll have something like this, a disk image. You may actually see that the extension has a .iso on it if you're using like a Linux environment right now or a Macintosh environment. Either way, this experience should be very much the same. So we are going to create a new virtual machine and give it a name. Now, VirtualBox is pretty smart. It knows if you start to type in, for example, Ubuntu, it'll start to change the type of environment. We're going to run Linux, of course, 64-bit, and we can choose right here from the very beginning our ISO, and this will connect it. So I will click it and click on Other, and then, of course, navigate to my downloads and the ISO, the Ubuntu 22.04. And of course, we can click Next. Now, it's going to ask you to do a couple other things. There is an unattended install. I would rather do like the more traditional install just for you. And so for that, I'm going to remove the ISO here. Okay, so what I had to do is actually delete this so that it would go back to more of a traditional install. So we'll click next from here. Now, it's a good idea whenever you're installing to consider how much memory do you have available on your host system. Now for me, I have quite a bit. This is represented in megabytes, but this is a 32 gig of RAM system. As well as my CPU cores. Now this is an 8-core system, i7, but because it has hyper-threading, it treats each one of those cores as multi-core, right? So you get to duplicate that number. And we get to decide how many cores do we want to give to our operating system. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit more beefy. I'll give it a 4-core system. And then also 2 gigs of RAM. That's nice. I have plenty of RAM. So I'm going to go up to 4 gigs of RAM. Right now, just so you know, 1024 megabytes equals 1 gig. That's actually the increment. So that's why you see it's not quite exactly 4,000, but just so you know, that should be 4 gigs of RAM. Okay. And we can click on next. And then now we have an opportunity to create the hard drive. Now the hard drive is different from RAM, naturally. Like RAM is random access memory. This is where the computer, the processor, is storing things as it's working with it, right? That's what RAM is. The hard disk is where we're going to install everything. If you're familiar in computer speak, you probably have, your files, your photos, your movies, and all those sort of things are really stored on the hard disk. And we're going to create a virtualized version of that disk now. Again, it really depends on your host system, your laptop, your desktop, whatever you're using right now, how much space you have available. And the particular operating system you install might require that you have a certain amount of space. I do know that Ubuntu Desktop does ask for quite a bit of space versus the server install. I'm going to leave this, I'll actually bump it up just a little bit. We'll bump it up to about 35 gigs. Again, I have plenty of space on this system, but in your case, you might not have that much. So please just consider giving it the amount that it requires at a minimum here. And of course, we're going to show how to install other desktop Linux environments that might be a little bit more lightweight for you in another video. Okay, so we're going to click next on this. And of course, we can click finish. So we now have a virtual machine that is ready to run. However, it does not have what is required to boot. We need to give it that ISO and know to boot from it. So what we'll do is we'll go to settings and we will go to storage. And inside here, you'll see the IDE controller. This has a virtual disk drive available. And so we need to mount a CD and we can find that file. So here we go, choose a disk file and navigate to downloads and the Ubuntu and click OK. And now it's as though we placed the disk inside the CD DVD drive. We'll click OK on this and all that's left to do is to click start. Now this will start up an actual machine and this will prompt you with a window to walk through all the install steps. So we'll give this just a moment, and once this is up and running, I'll bring you right back. Okay, so I'm going to move the VirtualBox Manager to the background, and we're going to close this prompt. There's an auto capture for your mouse and keyboard. Right now, what we're looking at is something that's called a grub menu. And this is how the machine knows what would you like to boot into. There's various boot options from this disk. We want to try or install Ubuntu. And so we'll go ahead and press enter on that option. Now this will take a few moments to finally get into the first install screen. In fact, it's actually booting into a live version of the desktop environment. What you will be doing is instead of running off of a hard drive, you're running off of the disk image. Now, if we were booting from, say, like I said before, if we were booting from this USB drive, you would literally be running your operating system off of this versus, say, a hard drive, right? Hard drives are fairly large, or they could be like small SSDs. In this case, we're literally running off of the, virtual disk on a virtual drive on a virtual computer even. So one of the things you may find that you need to do is you may need to actually change the resolution to complete the installer. For me, I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone. I think that it's going to work out okay for me. If you wanted to, if you're so inclined, you can click on Try Ubuntu, And this is literally going to boot you into what would be the desktop environment had you installed it on the drive. And this is what it looks like. Now, what's nice about this is that you can preview a operating system before you have actually gone and erased a hard drive and installed it on disk. Now, we know, again, just from looking at this, that as I scale this window, it's a little small, a little hard to see everything. I gotta click on this, click on type setting, right? And here's settings. And we'll navigate to the displays, somewhere inside here. Okay, displays. We'll just change that resolution to something a little bit better. We're currently on the lowest one. Let's try this one. Click apply. Keep changes. All right. Should look a lot better than it did. And it does. Okay. Now, we could actually work with this system. We can look at the applications that are installed. We could open up a terminal if we wanted to. But in this case, all I'm really interested in doing is showing you that, yes, you could get into that desktop environment and you could kind of play with some things and get an idea of what it's like to have Linux and what it's like to have this Ubuntu desktop. So let's get to it. So we'll click on Install Ubuntu. Okay, and this brings us back to exactly the place we were before. And we'll go ahead and click Continue on English. And for me, my keyboard is English US. Continue. All right, so you do have the option to choose normal installation or minimal installation. And then also you can ask to install third-party software. For me, I'm going to do all of those things, only because if I have to add it later, usually you have to do it through like apt-get update and that sort of thing. I'd rather just do it all now, and I'll leave it at the normal installation. So we'll click continue on this. And then now you can choose for this disk that we've configured, okay, what do we want to do with it? Do we want to erase everything? Do you want to do something else? We're just going to erase everything on this virtual disk. Remember, it means nothing to us. It's virtualized. It's being used for no other purpose. And so we'll click install now. And continue. And the last thing we need to do is select a time zone for your region. Continue. Okay. And this is the last step. So give it your name. I'm Justin. And this will give me a PC name, right? Justin VirtualBox. And then as well, it'll give you a username. And then of course you need to set your password. All right. And click continue. What's coming now is essentially files are being copied over to the hard disk system so that it can actually boot from the hard drive, the virtual hard drive that is, versus the installation media. We need to wait for this process to complete. So I'm going to hit pause on the record and I'll come back as soon as we're done installing. All right, now if everything goes well, your installation completes without error, you'll be prompted with something like this, where the installation's complete, but now you need to restart. So we'll click on the restart option now and prepare for our first boot up into our operating system. All right, and so what it's doing now is it's asking us, hey, listen, if this were on a desktop environment, again, remember, I keep referencing this. If you had like a USB key or if you had like a disk or something like that inside the system, you'd want to remove that at this point. For us, it's as simple as it's automatically removed, but we're going to click enter. Okay. And it's very normal, even in like a normal Linux install on like a regular, like hard bare metal on your PC, you're going to see text like popping up, just a very common thing. One of the things to make note about Linux is really all just about the kernel. There's something that's basically between you and the hardware, and that's what the kernel is. And what we're doing in a desktop Linux environment is we're adding an application that lets us interact with that kernel, right? And in this case, it is Ubuntu's version of something called Genome. All right, so here is our virtual machine, and depending on what your username and password is, you'll enter it now. we're going to drop into the environment. Now, things are really small here, and we're going to, of course, fix that. So we'll do it again. Settings. And find our displays again, and choose a resolution that we like. We're already at the smallest resolution. I'll go up a couple. Okay. All right. You can also make some decisions about what the UI looks like. We're going to leave that alone for now. Now it's asking me, do I want to sign into online accounts? Feel free to do this as you wish. In my case, I'm going to click skip. I am going to leave this alone. We'll click next. All right. And I'm going to choose to not send my information to Canonical. So who is this organization? These are the folks who help put together Ubuntu for us. We get to use it. I'm going to say no for now. Click next. I don't mind location services being activated, so I'll go ahead and click that on. Click next. Okay. And this is sort of a, hey, if you want to install software, let's take you to the application store. I'm going to click done on this. Now it is telling me, listen, there's been some updates that have come through. Would you like to install them now? And certainly I could say yes on this. In fact, I can dig in and look at all the various updates that are available for my system. I'm going to ask it to remind me later. Okay. So this is it. You're now inside your very own Linux desktop. All right. So in the coming videos, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can, number one, we have one machine, but I probably want this machine to talk to another machine, right? I want to move data in between the two. And we're going to use this as an environment to install some software tools. Examples would be like Elastic Beats. We're going to look at perhaps FluentD. And we're going to send that data to a system that we can make that more usable in. So the next step will be looking at how we can modify the networking and also connect to this machine remotely. So stay tuned and join for the next video where we cover that topic. Thanks again.